be starting in chapter 5. And we're going to read through the whole thing this time. And then as we look at it the next couple of weeks, I'll just point out the specific verses that we're going to be focusing on. But this morning, I feel it's important for us to get the whole picture. And so starting in verse 1, it says, "Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive of a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, 'If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy.' Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. 'By all means go.' The king of Aram replied, 'I will send a letter to the king of Israel.' And so Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, 'With this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you may cure him of his leprosy.' As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, 'Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me.' When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: 'Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel.' So Naaman went with his horses and his chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him to say, 'Go, wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed.' So Naaman went away angry and said, 'I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?' So he turned and went off in a rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, 'My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed?' So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all of his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, 'Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant.' Verse 16, the prophet answered, 'As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept a thing.' And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. 'If you will not,' said Naaman, 'please let me, your servant, be given as much as a pair of mules can carry, for your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to any other god but the Lord. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing. When my master enters the temple of Rimmon to bow down, and he is leaning on my arm, and I have to bow there also, when I bow down in the temple, may the Lord forgive your servant for this.' 'Go in peace,' Elisha said. After Naaman had traveled some distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, 'My master was way too easy on Naaman, this Aramean, by not accepting from him what he brought. As surely as the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him.' Verse 21, so Gehazi hurried after Naaman, and when Naaman saw him running toward him, he got down from the chariot to meet him. 'Is everything all right?' he asked. 'Everything is right,' Gehazi answered. 'My master sent me to say 2 young men from the company of the prophets have just come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 sets of clothing.' 'By all means, take 2 talents,' said Naaman. And he urged Gehazi to accept them, and then tied up the 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 sets of clothing. He gave them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them ahead of Gehazi. And when Gehazi came to the hill, he took the things from the servants and put them away in the house. He sent the men away, and then they left. When he went in and stood before his master, Elisha asked him, 'Where have you been?' 'Your servant didn't go anywhere,' Gehazi answered. But Elisha said to him, 'Was not my spirit with you when you went to the man? When the man got down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to take money or to accept clothes, or olive groves and vineyards, or flocks and herds, or male and female slaves? Naaman's leprosy will cling to you and your descendants forever.' Then Gehazi went from Elisha's presence, and his skin was leprous, and it had become as white as snow." Now I know that was a lot that we just read through, I understand all that, but like I said, I wanted you to see the full picture just in case you didn't have a chance to read it earlier this week when I sent that out. Because we're going to be breaking down different perspectives of this chapter. There's a ton of stuff that's going on right there, but the first thing that I want to focus on this morning is that we notice that Naaman is a commander over the army of Aram. And so right out of the box, when we look at that, I think it's safe for us to understand that Naaman is a big deal, okay? But he's made an even bigger deal because of two things that I see right out of the gate. One, the text says that he brings results, right? The Bible says that through him, the Lord brought victory to Aram. And so the text describes him when we were reading through it as a valiant soldier, right? It says that he's a valiant soldier. And when you look up the word valiant, it means possessing or showing courage or determination. So from that little description, we can see that Naaman is a hard worker, right? We can see that he is disciplined at his craft. We can see that this is something that he takes seriously, so much so that the number two reason that he's a big deal is because it has given him high regard in the eyes of the king, right? The text says, now we have to understand this because I think it helps paint a picture for us that God is trying to point out for us. The text says that Naaman has leprosy. Okay? And this is important. It says that he has leprosy. And so I want to paint a picture for a second of what leprosy was like in this time. Okay? At this time, and I'm not trying to be insensitive. Actually, I'm not just at this time, in any time. This is something that's considered gross, right? This is something that's considered dirty. And so leprosy, it causes these boils and bumps to break out all over someone's body, and it's hard to look at. Like I did a Google search over this, and it's hard to see. But that's not the only thing that it does, right? Like when we listen to people talk about leprosy in the Bible, we just listen to the skin condition, but it does so much more than that. It attacks the nerves of the person, and eventually it causes the loss of feeling for a person in their arms and legs, right? And so if a person can't get the treatment that they need, then WebMD says it permanently damages your arms and your legs. They'll be of no use to you. And so when I was doing this research, I was reminded, okay, that's what the medical stuff looks like. But then there's another side to this, right? When a person has leprosy, what happened to them in the biblical times? It says that they were thrown out of the city, right? They were shunned. They were considered unclean. Leviticus chapter 13 says, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priest. And the priest shall examine the sore of the body, and if the hair on the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it's a leprous sore. Then the priest shall examine it and pronounce him unclean. Okay? So this is something, like I said, is considered dirty. And so everything, think about this picture that's being painted. Everything that this person has known, everything that they've loved, those things were taken away from them, right? They no longer can get a hold of those things because they're forced to live outside the city because leprosy was scary, right? This is a big deal back then because there was no cure for it and it's contagious and they can't risk it spreading throughout the city. And so they take these people and they put them outside in the slums. But it's not just that. Then there's the shame that comes with leprosy, right? When a person is considered unclean, if a person that's considered clean comes around them, then they have to announce themselves to those people. So anytime someone was near them that wasn't one of the leprous people, they had to say, hey, I'm unclean. Don't come over here because I'm dirty. You don't want to get this. I'm unclean. This was the life that these people were leading, right? This is what happened when a person has leprosy. They were to warn people, don't come near me. And so after painting that picture, if that is indeed the case, then that makes things interesting when we're looking at Naaman, right? Because if Naaman had leprosy, why isn't he shunned from the city? Why is he still there? Why is he still commander? Why are these things still happening? Well, now we can go back to the text when it says that he is highly regarded. I think that this information is painting a bright picture for us. I think that when it talks about high regard, this is more than just the king having respect for him. I think that this is trying to paint a picture that says that the king actually cares for Naaman, right? This is deeper than just a master-servant relationship. Like there's genuine love between these two. And so if we can come to this conclusion, then it would make sense for the king of Aram then to respond the way that he does when he hears what the girl from Israel says. Okay, look at how the picture's starting to come together. The text says that he responds to it by saying, by all means, go. Now think about the times that we've heard that saying, by all means. I remember that I had a coach that would say to me, Michael, by any means necessary, you get to that quarterback and you get him down to the ground, right? So if I had to cheat, scratch, claw, bite, whatever I needed to do, my job was to get that quarterback to the ground. Even if I had to cheat to get there, that's what it means, right? So when someone says that term, by all means, it means anything within my power to do, I'll do it to accomplish the task. That's what the king is saying here. So I find it interesting that the king talks like this to Naaman because, again, now we're seeing a picture. This is bigger than just master-servant, right? This is bigger than just leader and commander of the army. There's relationship there. But the king doesn't just stop with that. The king then says, I'll also send a letter to the king of Israel. What is this trying to say to us? It's saying, I want their king to know that you don't go on your own accord, right? You're not going there for a stroll through the city. Like, you're here on official kingdom business. I want the king to understand that I am sending you there appointed by me. This is a big deal, right? The king doesn't have to do that, but this is what he does because he genuinely cares for this man. So however you want to look at it, I think it's safe for us to acknowledge that the king is excited about the news that he heard. Why? This is the question that I've been wrestling with this week of why is he getting excited? Why would this be something that brings passion and hope out of him? I think that the text says it beautifully when she's talking, right? The girl doesn't say, oh, he has leprosy. That's easy. I know the perfect physician for this. He needs to just go and see my guy and it'll be taken care of. That's not what happens, right? Because that's what we tend to do. I remember the very first time that I hurt my shoulder, right? I was on sabbatical in Tennessee. And I was in the gym and I was lifting, doing military presses, and my shoulder, something was wrong. And so when I got done with the gym, I was in my car and I tried to lift my bag into the car and I couldn't even get my bag up. So I went to a doctor there. And while I was there, the doctor, he put my arm in a sling and did all those things. And then he said, when you get home, you need to find somewhere that you can get physical therapy on your shoulder because, it's just worn out. They need to help you break up all the little junk and stuff. And I remember when I got home back to Uniontown, everyone that I knew in my church, all the people that I had relationships with, everyone knew the best doctor that I needed to go to, right? And I tried these different doctors and they all, in my opinion, sucked or weren't good because my shoulder still hurts to this day, right? Like I'm still dealing with the pain from it. But I just remember in that moment, everyone knew the best person, right? And that's what we do in our society. Oh, you went to this doctor, are they good? Oh, you went to that restaurant, you should have went here. Like we always have a recommendation for something, right? But that's not what this girl is saying. Because if she would have said that, I believe that the king and even Naaman would have disregarded it, right? Like Naaman would have never even taken it to the king to begin with. Naaman's wife probably never would have brought it to him because they probably tried these things and they know there's no cure for this disease. There's no point in us wasting money on trying to find one of these physicians because they can't do anything about it. But that's not what the girl says, right? She says something different. She says, if only my master would see the prophet who's in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy. There's so much that we could dive into with just those two sentences. But for the sake of time, we'll address that on another day, right? But the point is that when the king hears this, something happens in him. The king gets hopeful. The king gets excited. And again, I think it's safe to come to this conclusion because what this woman proclaims is different, right? Again, this isn't just another recommendation for a physician around the towns, right? Or in another city. That's not what she's doing. They've already tried that. Instead, what's happening is he says, if you would go and see the prophet, those words carry power, don't they? See, I think that the king understands something. I think that the king understands that there's hope to be found in Samaria. Once he hears that there's a prophet there, he understands that there's hope to be found in Samaria. And the hope is not in the prophet, right? Because to put the hope in the prophet, that's silly. But instead, I think that this king understands something, that where the prophet is, God is also there. I think that the king understands that. And so he sends him on his way. And to make sure that it happens, he says, not only am I going to let you go there by any means necessary, but I'm also going to write you a letter so they understand this is urgent, right? Like this means something to me. This is kingdom business. And so when I was going through that, I think that I started to come to this conclusion that when a person opens up their Bible, we can see that where God is at, that's where the people tend to flock to. And again, it's not all of them, right? We know the Pharisees and the Sadducees and people like that wanted to see Jesus, like they're against it because they're for their own gain. We see that stuff in the Bible. We see that stuff today. But when we read through our Bible, we understand something quickly. When the prophet came to town, people heard about it, right? They were listening for that. It meant something to them. When Jesus came to town, people heard about it and they wanted to be there. When Jesus was in town, they wanted to be near him because there's hope in that place. That is what the king of this text this morning understands. If I can just get you there, if I can just get you to Samaria, there's hope that this thing can be cured. And so by any means, let's see you get there. And we see this all throughout the Bible. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, one of my all-time favorite stories, is Luke chapter 7, 36 through 50. And I won't read the whole thing, but it starts like this. Verse 36 says, one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to eat with him. So Jesus went into the Pharisee's house and sat at the table. A sinful woman in the town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she brought an alabaster jar of perfume and stood behind Jesus at his feet crying. Now again, there's so much that's happening in just those 3 little verses. We could be here forever talking about it, but let's just start to break it down a little bit. Simon asked Jesus to come to eat with him. And that's not out of the ordinary because Simon is a Pharisee, right? He's a religious man. He's supposed to be a man of God. He'd be considered a hotshot in the town. So it would make sense that he would want to meet with Jesus, right? But when you know what we know about the Pharisees, it's probably safe to say that it's nothing more for him just to be able to say, look at me, I had Jesus come to my house, man, I'm a big deal, right? Like this is the bee's knees or whatever people, I don't know, whatever they say now, I don't know. But then what happens, right? The text says this. It says a sinful woman in town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. Listen to how the text describes her. The text says a sinful woman. Now, I find this interesting every time I read it because the Bible makes it clear that we are all sins and have fallen short of the glory of God. But the text goes out of its way to describe this woman as a sinner. Why? Could it be that because that's the label that people have given her around the town? Okay, let's follow this thinking for just a little bit. Because see, we do this sometimes, right? When I'm trying to ask someone, like I'll see a person and I think they look familiar and I'd be like, hey, do you know my brother Tim? Right? And they'll be like, oh, Tim, that name sounds familiar, but I can't picture it. So what do? We start to describe it. Well, he's tall, he plays basketball, he's strong, he's mixed, he's this and that. Like we start to give the adjectives to describe, right? We go down the list. So just imagine now the conversation that they're having about this girl, right? Come on, man, you know the one that I'm talking about, the sinful girl. And they'll be like, oh yeah, why didn't you just say that? Right? Can you imagine those types of conversations that are going on? I know exactly who you're talking about. Could these be the types of conversations that people have about her? See, some speculate that they use this text or they use this type of writing in the text because they say that the woman is a prostitute. Okay, so imagine if this is true, what kind of things do people say about her? Again, using our clues, we know that they're not good things because the man of God, Simon, when you go later into the story, it says he thinks to himself, if Jesus were a prophet, he would know that the woman touching him is a sinner. Think about that. This is supposed to be the man of God. And it says, if Jesus were a prophet, he would know that the woman touching him is a sinner. All of this is important because I want you to try and imagine the type of life that this woman has lived. Okay, it probably hasn't been kind to her, right? It's probably been rough. See, it's not like today, man. I was thinking about this. See, today in our society, a woman can be a sexual being and we celebrate that, right? Or people will celebrate that, won't they? It's considered a liberating thing. Women are taking their sexuality back. But back then, that's not the case, right? Back then, for a woman to be a sexual being, if this woman was a prostitute, that is something that's frowned upon, that is shunned, right? It's not considered liberating like it is today. And so here's all this stuff that this woman is going through, or she's been through. And yet when she hears that Jesus is going to be in town, what does she do? She goes to be near him. And it says that she brought an alabaster jar of perfume and she stood behind Jesus and she was crying. Why would she do this? If you were here last week, then you remember what we talked about. We talked about what happens when a person gets connected with Jesus. Jesus says, when you are tired and you are weary, you can come to me and I will give you rest. Can this be what we're experiencing when we read through this story? Could it be that she's finally in a place where she's at rest? Right? Could it be that she has been carrying this burden and this shame and whatever other junk there is? And so in his presence, she's finally able to shed the baggage, right? In his presence, she's finally in a place where she can find rest. So much so that, I love this story. So much so that words can't even be exchanged. So much so she can't even say anything. It just says she drops down and she begins to wash his feet with her hair and she begins to kiss his feet because she is overwhelmed by the majesty of it all, right? She's finally found hope. So much so that she can't even get the words out to say the stuff that we're taught in church, right? Like, will you forgive me? Will you help me? You don't think I'm dirty, do you, Jesus, right? Like she doesn't deal with those things because she's overwhelmed by the story. She hears that he's in town and she needs to be near him. And we see this all throughout text. Luke chapter 8 verse 40 says, and it came to pass that when Jesus was returned, the people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him. Okay? And again, this shows people getting excited that Jesus is near. So much so that when you read the story, that the people are swarming around him. It's like a celebrity has entered town, right? And you've seen that like on, when the paparazzi gets all around celebrities and stuff, that mob when they're trying to push through. Imagine that that's what's happening right here, because that's the case. This shows people getting excited about Jesus. But one person in particular was a woman who has an issue of bleeding. And the text tells us this. It says she spent all of her living upon physicians and none could heal her, right? So think about that. All of her living. It means she spent every dime she had. It spent her savings, all of that stuff, trying to find healing, and she couldn't find any. But when she hears that Jesus is in town, she finds hope again, right? And I love this picture that they paint for us, because she's like, I don't want to talk to him. I don't need a picture with him. I'm not trying to distract him. If I can just touch his garment, right? So what does she do? She gets down on her hands and knees in the mud and the filth and all that stuff. And she's crawling through, trying to push through the people, probably risking being trampled if the crowd is as ruckus as it's saying. But she says, if I can just get near him, I can be healed, right? See, there's hope in his presence. When the royal official in John hears that Jesus is in Galilee, it says that he went to him and begged him to heal his son. And then bringing it back full circle, when Jesus heals the man with leprosy in Mark chapter 1, he tells the man, don't tell people what happened. Instead, this is what I want you to do. Show yourself to the priest, right? Because what happened? When a person finds out that they have leprosy, they have to go to the priest for the priest to say that they're clean or not clean. So Jesus says, don't tell them what happened. Just go and show yourself to the priest and then offer up the sacrifices that Moses commanded after you do it, right? And so the whole story goes on. But then the point of it is that Jesus is kicked out of the city. He's not allowed to go back in there, right? He has to stay outside of the gates. And this is what the text tells us, that people came to him from everywhere. Why? They came to him from everywhere. That means that they left the cushiness of their city, the restaurants, the shops, all of that stuff. They left all of that to go out to the slums. And what did we say about people with leprosy? They were cast out of the city. They were the people that were considered dirty. And it's not just them. This will be where the prostitutes are. This will be where all the bad people, all the sinful people, all the dirty people. This is where they would be at. And yet people left where they were at to be near Jesus. Why? Because there's hope there. And I know that some people will hear that and they'll think, well, this is just one big, long tangent. But that's not the case. I'm trying to paint a vivid picture of my point for this morning. When the king hears that the prophet is in Samaria, it makes sense for him to react this way, because it's the reaction of so many people throughout the scripture. When the prophet of the Lord is in town, they understand God is there. And where God is, there is hope to be found. And these are not just my words. I'm not just throwing that word hope around for no reason. Isaiah 40 verse 31 says, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and they will not be faint. See, there is power in the presence of the Lord. There's power to be found there. And when I was reading this morning, or this week, and I was preparing for the message this morning, I got to tell you honestly, man, that my heart just began to get so heavy. Because I began to wonder when I'm reading through this, what has happened to the church? And not just our church, the church in general, right? All the churches in our city, all the churches in the world. How have we gotten so far from this understanding, right? And that might be bold for me to say. I don't want to put this on anyone else, so I'll just focus on me. Maybe everybody else has it all figured out, but I'll just focus on me this morning. As I was reading through this text, I had to take an inventory of my life, and I had to ask myself some hard questions. How come when people are hurting and depressed or struggling, whatever their situations are, how come they're not swarming around the pastors? How come people aren't filling the seats in the churches anymore, in the buildings? What's happening with us, right? I had to ask that question because, again, as we talk about, the Bible tells us that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But this is what Jesus tells us in John 14, verse 12. He says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I have been doing, and they will do even greater than these, because I'm going to the Father." Think about that Jesus says right there. He says that you will not only do the things that I've been doing, but then you will get the power to do even greater things than I've done. You will do even greater things than me. And as I was thinking about that, if this is the case, then somewhere in my life I have disconnected from the power of the Lord. I haven't done the things that Jesus was doing, let alone tapped into the power to do things greater than him. And again, I don't know where people, whoever's watching this or whoever may see this one day in the future, I don't know where you are on this journey. But I said to the Lord this week for Michael, I said, I don't want to live another day not tapping into the resource of who you are. I don't want to live my life like that. Not because I want the glory, and I know that there's going to be someone that heard me say, why aren't people swarming to the pastor? And they're going to think, man, that was such an arrogant thing to say. But listen to the point that I'm trying to make. It's not because I want them to be near me. It's not because I want people to think, oh, Michael is so great, or your pastor or whoever is such an awesome person. I want it to be the same way that they feel when the prophet was in town, because they know that where the prophet is, that's where God is at. And I want the same thing to be for me. I want people to understand that wherever Michael is at, he's bringing God with him. It's not me bringing me, I'm bringing Jesus for people to be connected to him. That's what I want people to see. I want it to be that when people enter the doors of this church or your church or any church around the world, I want them to know that they're not coming to see the pastor, but may they come with an expectation of, I need to get myself over to New Vision because it's there that I'll find hope, right? Or whatever church you're in. I want it to be that they will find hope in that place. And it's not just for me, but it's my hope that for anyone that picks up the mantle of Christian, right? That word means something. And I know that we've allowed it to become, I don't know if dirty is the right word, but that's the only thing that I can think of. Christianity, that word has lost its meaning because so many people carry that title, but they don't live the life according to what it means, right? Christianity means to be Christ-like. So this is what Jesus means when he tells us in the text to be either hot or to be cold, right? Either tap into the source and do things greater than I've done, tap into that, or stay off the pot. But this life of living lukewarm, man, I've been convicted of this heavily this week. Being lukewarm for too long, and it's my desire now more than ever, and I'm genuinely saying this to you, even holding it to be held accountable. Lord, will you allow me to get closer to you that I can lead others to be near you? Will you allow me to be closer to you so that people will find hope and that they'll be inspired and that they will know that this is a place that they can come and they will find you, not me. Lord, I don't care if I ever become famous or whatever for being a pastor. Lord, I want people to know who you are. And I genuinely mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I'm asking that if you're carrying the mantle of Christian, may you make that your call in your life as well. I want people to be excited when they get near you because they know that when they're with you, they'll find hope. That's what this king understood when he heard that the prophet was in Samaria. He says, we've tried all these other things with these physicians. I can afford the best doctors in the world. I'm the king of Aram. But none of those things work. But when I hear that the prophet is there, I know that if you can just get to that place, you can find something that will save you, that will help you, that will cure you, name it. So go by all means. Why can't that be the place? Why can't that be this place today? Is that fair? And so that's been my prayer this week. That's been my desire. And if you're not already plugged into it, that is my desire for you. And so with that being said, we're going to pray, and then we're going to dismiss. So, Heavenly Father, I come to you right now. Lord, I pray that these words were not just words that go in one ear and out the other, Lord, but I pray that they mean something again. Lord, if there are people that have been riding the fence, I pray that you will, Lord, I pray that you will just take control of our lives, that you will just intervene, that you will pierce our heart, and that you will inspire us to get connected to you again, Lord. I pray that the miraculous will happen when we tap into your power, because that's what you said that we could do, Jesus. You said if we believe in you, we will do greater things than you did. Lord, may that be the thing that happens in our churches again. If there are churches that have already tapped into this, Lord, good for them. May they use their influence to inspire others. But Lord, for people like myself, God, I pray that you will pierce my heart, that you will hold me accountable, that you will fill me up with who you are, and may that thing overflow out of me so that when people come near me, they will be inspired and touched by you. Because, Lord, I just want to see people come to know who you are. And so that's my charge for this, Lord. I'm asking once again that as we're going through this corona stuff, Lord, that you would just keep people healthy, that you will keep us safe. Once again, Lord, I ask that you will be with our leaders. Lord, as they're trying to figure out what it is that they're supposed to do, I pray that they don't take these decisions lightly, Lord, but may they understand what it means to come and speak to you again. And Lord, may you inspire them and influence their decisions. And Lord, I pray that this thing will be something that is done quickly. I pray that if there are people that are suffering from it, Lord, may they find healing in your name, and may something beautiful be done out of this. So as always, Lord, keep us healthy, keep us safe. I ask all of this in your name, God. Amen.